So this morning, we're talking about what has to be, in the long history of marriage proposals, one of the most unique proposals in that history. Ruth took this very risky step of proposing marriage herself, a penniless beggar, to a wealthy older man. And as I read this, as the minister, I immediately think, so what would I say at the wedding? What scripture passage would be appropriate for me to use at this wedding of an unlikely couple, this young woman marrying a rich older man? Maybe 1 Peter 5:5. Those of you who are young, be subject to the elders. Maybe that one would work. Or Haggai 2:8. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, says the Lord. Or Joel 2:8. It shall come to pass that your old men shall dream dreams. That one would cause a reaction. Or maybe they would just find a better minister to do the wedding service. About a third of the weddings that I do, they use a famous love passage from 1 Corinthians 13, and it's easily the most used passage at weddings. In fact, I bet a lot of us can say it with me. In fact, any movie that you see where there's a wedding, 1 Corinthians 13 is used. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. That, my friends, is a generous love. That is an incredibly generous love. But I always sort of cringe when I read that passage for a new bride and groom, because what Paul is talking about here is perfected love, and we are far from perfect. And I always make a point of telling the young couple and everyone I know present, because how difficult it is to sustain any loving relationship, let alone marriage, because we tend to be impatient. We tend to be unkind. We have a challenging time bearing and enduring all things. And our love definitely at times comes to an end. And truth be known, most of us don't feel that we are loved in the way we need to be loved, or that we love in the way that we should be loved. God made marriages because He knows our love needs to be sustained as it waxes and wanes or even disappears altogether. See, human love, it's just not that generous. But Jesus' love is. Jesus is a generous God. There is a generous, overflowing, overwhelming love that just flows from the heart of God. And this is the love that Jesus intends for us to give. And this is the love that Jesus intends for us to receive. John 7:38, Jesus promised, whoever believes in me, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Now, I don't know about you, but most days my heart does not feel like a river. Many days my heart feels more like a muddy rut than a flowing river. How is my heart transformed to give and receive the generous love of Jesus for which I have been made? Well, Ruth found out. When we left Ruth last week, she was keeping her mother-in-law, Naomi, who renamed herself Mara, which means bitter, and both their husbands had died, leaving them absolutely nothing. And Ruth left her family, and she left her home and everything she'd ever known to follow Naomi to Bethlehem. And Naomi seemingly had absolutely nothing to offer Ruth. Ruth spent her days as a gleaner, picking up grains of barley out in the field that the guys walking through for harvest had missed, earning a very little every day, about $4.50 in our terms. And she shared everything she had with Naomi when she came home at the long of an end day, or at the end of a long day. Yeah, that's right, at the end of a long day. And Ruth did her gleaning in the field of a cousin to Naomi's dead husband, an older man, an unmarried man named Boaz. And Boaz took great care of Ruth. He didn't treat her like a beggar picking up scraps, but he treated her like a guest of honor. He fed her. He allowed her to glean among the sheaves. He kept her safe from harm from anyone in that lawless land that might do something evil to her. And Boaz, he was a good man. And Naomi knew that a good man is hard to find. So she advised Ruth, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? Now, by rest, what Naomi meant was she thought Ruth should take a rest in Boaz's ever-loving arms. She wanted Ruth to live a life of generous love, where she could be loved and give love and experience the security and abundance that comes from having someone in our life to love. And so Naomi advised Ruth to wash up, put on some perfume, put on a nice dress, and go down to the threshing floor. Now we may say, why the threshing floor? Why would she ever go there? Well, the threshing floor was where all the grain and the produce from the harvest was stored. And after a long day of working at the harvest, people would usually spend a long, fun night making merry, eating and drinking and retiring to some dark and quiet place to rest. And some people spent the night in each other's arms on the threshing floor. It is family worship month, so I'm choosing my words carefully here. The threshing floor, well, it was a singles club of the 11th century BC. The Studio 64 of the Bronze Age. And believe it or not, the prophet Hosea actually warned Israel about their immoral and indecent threshing floor activities. So Naomi didn't advise Ruth to do anything immoral, anything indecent. Interesting, definitely. Intimate, definitely, but not indecent. Naomi told Ruth, after she had gussied up, to wait until Boaz had come from eating and drinking and his heart was merry, and that she should lie down next to Boaz, and she should uncover his feet. And she advised, he will tell you what to do. Well, that's exactly what Ruth did. With his stomach full of food and drink and the threshing floor full of barley, Boaz lay down at the end of a big heap of grain. And then the old man, he got the surprise of his life. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Now, at this point, Ruth followed Naomi's instructions to the letter. But Ruth was bold. She was bold, and perhaps sensing the moment, she took things a step further. Right then and right there, with his feet uncovered, Ruth asked Boaz to marry her. And it was common practice in that day and age for a woman to be married to the nearest, closest relative, but it was very uncommon practice for a woman to propose such a thing. And the man, in this case, by marriage, who was providing a way for his bride to escape her desperate situation, was known as a redeemer. Ruth said, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." You know, I read that and I'm thinking, gosh, I wish I could have thought of something that good when I asked Jen to marry me. And I was so nervous I could barely get the words out. If I could have texted it to her, if I could have sent her a Facebook message, I would have done it. But Ruth, the widowed gleaner from Moab, she's spouting poetry. Well, old man Boaz quickly agreed to marry the young woman, and she had him actually at spread your wings, because Boaz knew that Ruth was a woman worthy of his love. And he actually considered Ruth's desire to want to be with him as sort of an act of faithfulness to God, an extension of the faithfulness she showed to her mother-in-law, Naomi, following her to her homeland. Boaz was so humble that he even implied that her desire to marry him was not so much about her love for him, but about her wanting to take care of her mother-in-law as well. Boaz said, "God bless you, my dear daughter." What a splendid expression of love. And you could have had your pick of any of the young men around. Now, did Ruth at this point say, "Oh, shoot, really? Nuts. Why didn't I know about that?" No, she didn't do that. Ruth snuggled next to Boaz all night long. And she left while it was dark, before anyone could see her, lest they get the wrong idea. And before she left, Boaz gave to Ruth a gift of barley, as much barley as she could carry, sort of as a promise and a proof that he would do all that he said that he would do. Sort of the agricultural equivalent of an engagement ring, somewhere along those lines. Ruth came home and she told Naomi all that had happened and all that Boaz promised to do. And Naomi, knowing Boaz's character, said, "He will not rest. He will not rest until he has done what he has promised." When we love someone, we keep our promises. We've been asking 4 questions in this sermon series. Where are you going? Where's your home? Who do you love? Who is your God? Where are you going? Where is your home? Who do you love? Who is your God? When I marry people and they don't have an idea for verse to use, there's one verse that I always recommend, and it is Ruth's covenant promise to her mother-in-law. Ruth 1:16 and 17. Do not urge me to leave you or turn from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. It's a great statement of covenant love, but it is founded and it is grounded in a trust in God and a faithfulness in God. You see, when we believe in a generous God, we open up our lives to a generous love. And because Ruth believed in a generous God, she knew where she was going. She knew that despite her meager present, despite her troubles, that this incredible future lay ahead. Where are you going? Where are you going? Let's talk about love for a second as we answer that question. Biblically speaking, love is sacrifice for the good of another. Jesus himself taught that greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Love, biblically speaking, is not a feeling. It is an action. It is tangible. It is real, and it is sometimes costly. Because love is sacrifice, there can be no love without risk. We cannot love without exposing our heart and handing over a part of ourselves that is fragile, that is precious, to another human being, with the hope that they treat it as carefully and they treat it as cautiously as it deserves. And we all know just how well we do with love. We're sinful people. We're broken people. Our love can be rude and our love can be arrogant, and we do insist upon our own way. Indeed, I bet if I asked everyone here to name the first person who broke your heart, you could probably tell me and give me explicit details. With school beginning this week, I thought I would tell you about Dawn, a little girl in my first grade class, who for one blissful autumn week was my girlfriend. We spent all of recess together, we ate lunch together, we pulled our desks next to each other in class, and suddenly the next week, she was Danny's girlfriend. And the week after that, she was Cora's girlfriend. And the week after that, she was Rodney's girlfriend. And the week after that, someone else's. And when she batted around back to me through every other boy in the class, I was not so interested. My heart, my little first grade heart, had learned a painful lesson about Dawn and love. And Dawn would be the first of many people and places, events, and things to break my heart. Did anyone else have their heart broken in the bottom of the ninth inning last night besides me? Am I the only one? I'm not. I surely not. Surely not. Anywhere we hold out our heart, anywhere we hold out hope, unguarded from the sinful world, we risk. And Ruth knew this well. It was her loss of her husband, the loss of her life that brought her to Bethlehem in the first place, following her mother-in-law. There is no love without risk. And there is usually, no love without loss. And it is this loss that leaves our heart without the capacity to love. But what happens? What happens when our heart is filled with hope for the future? What happens when we know that the dawn is coming, when the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his wings? See, hope does not disappoint. When we have hope, we can have love. The great thing that hope does for us is hope allows us to see possibilities, and hope allows us to see promise where other people only see problems and peril. Hope allows us to hang on for a little while longer. Hope allows us to go where angels fear to tread, to spend beyond our resources, because we know that Jesus is going to pay us back. When we hope, we believe that beyond the dark horizon the sun is rising. We can love generously. We can love generously. Where is your home? Where's your home? Now, we were made in the image of God to give a generous love, and we were made to receive a generous love. That is our home. That is who we are made to be. We're not made to carry wounds. We're not made to bleed out. We're not made to have a heart made hard by loss. And we may have lived so long and we may have endured so much loss that that God's great design to love and to be loved seems more like an outrageous myth, more like a whispered rumor than reality. But we were made by Jesus to be something better. Ruth had a clear idea of who she is, that despite her humble circumstances, that God had made her to be someone greater than she appeared, someone greater than a beggar appears to be. An 11th century BC poor widow with the courage to ask a man to marry her, she knows who she is. She knows who she belongs to. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? When the world tells you one thing about who you are, and Jesus tells you something else, who do you believe? Who do you believe? The man who is commonly known as the last Roman general, he's a 6th century Christian, a man named Belisarius. Belisarius miraculously saved the empire from multiple enemies, many times, from the Goths and the Vandals and the Bulgars, and each time, against all odds, Belisarius drove the enemy away. And each time after he drove the enemy away, he was forced into exile, or he was otherwise minimized by a paranoid and jealous emperor. But he kept doing it again and again and again. And late in his life, he was wrongly convicted of corruption. And as the legend goes, the emperor put out the eyes of this great general, and he was forced to beg by the gates of the city. But Belisarius, as the legend goes, his spirits remained undimmed. Even with no eyes, he could see the man that God had made him to be. A lot of us in English lit class in high school maybe had to read a poem by Longfellow, who wrote a poem about the great general. It goes like this. Part of it goes like this. I am poor and old and blind. The sun burns me, and the wind blows through the city gate and covers me with dust. With gray uncovered head, beneath the very arch of my triumphal march, I stand and beg my bread. But this too I can bear. I am still Belisarius. Don't believe this world. Don't believe it. You may be poor in spirit, feeling old and tired, begging for some kind of bread, covered in the dust of sin. Never forget that you are the woman, you are the man, that Jesus, the maker of the cosmos, who spoke into darkness and created light, loves so extravagantly, so lavishly, with such immoderate and reckless generosity that he is willing to give his life. Jesus is a generous God. And you can bear whatever this broken world beats you with, because Jesus, our generous God, has overcome the world, and he loves you with a perfect love. When we have hope that we can be who Jesus made us to be and desires us to be, we can love generously. And then finally, this morning, who do you love? Who do you love? When we love the unlovable, when we love the hard to love, when we have compassion on the difficult, God pays us back in astonishing ways. Now, Naomi seemingly brought nothing to the table. Despite her bitter outlook on life and the fear that the hand of God was working against her, Ruth loved her. Ruth had compassion on her. Ruth was faithful where nearly anyone, including Naomi herself, would have advised her against it. But Naomi still had a role to play. Naomi still had something to give. God was not done with her yet. It was her plan that led Ruth to Boaz. And it was Naomi's family ties that established Boaz as Ruth's redeemer. And it was Ruth's kindness to Naomi that showed the whole world, most importantly Boaz, that she was a worthy woman. Think about how we might handle that differently now. See, we live in a throwaway society. As soon as something stops working or is broken, we let it go. As soon as a person becomes an annoyance to us, we have 1,000 ways that we can block them out of our life. You know, it's always interesting to go through our neighborhood on neighborhood cleanup day, the day that the city dispatches the dump trucks to pick up whatever you can drag out to the curb. And we see those things that people have simply given up on, that they want out of their life because their usefulness to them has been spent. You see the old box TVs and artificial Christmas trees, broken down barbecue grills, couches that look like they were a bed for a family of rhinos. You see mattresses that could be bent into like a taco. At one point, these things had value. Now we just want them gone. I've always thought there was a little bit of gospel, just a little bit, in the people who drive around the neighborhood in trucks, picking up things that other people have drug out to the curb to haul them home because they think they can find something useful for them, because they see some value in those things we've thrown out. But what about when it comes to people? When it comes to people, will we be the person who places on the curb the broken, those whose usefulness is spent, the hard to love? Or will we be the person who sees in them the image of God, something worth saving, something rare and beautiful and divinely given in everyone we meet? Can we be that generous with our love? Can we be that patient? Can we be that kind? Can we bear? Can we believe? Can we hope? Can we endure all things? We can, if we place our faith and our hope and our trust in a generous God. You see, we are the beggar in need of a wealthy Redeemer. We are the bride, and Jesus is the bridegroom. We are the one whom this broken world has widowed. We are the one in need of a home, the one in whom Jesus sees something worth saving, something rare and beautiful. Will you boldly ask him to be your Redeemer? Will you boldly ask him to spread the wings of his grace and his mercy over you? One of the things I've heard about 1 Corinthians 13 is that if we want to better understand its meaning, if we want to really live it out, then we should put our name in there in the place of love. I've never preached this, but it goes like this. Eric is patient, and Eric is kind, and Eric does not boast or envy, etc. That may be good advice for telling us who we really are. But if we really want to understand what it means, if we really want to know what Paul is getting at here, we should use a different name, the name of a generous God, and know that he is generous toward you. Jesus is patient and kind. Jesus does not envy or boast. He is not arrogant or rude. He does not insist on his own way. He's not irritable or resentful. Jesus does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Jesus bears all things. He believes all things. He hopes all things, endures all things. Jesus' love never, ever, ever ends. He is a generous God. He is a generous God. And he has an overflowing, overwhelming, outpoured love for you.